know if you're aware of this, but there's something called second screen viewing, right? So it's a directive that's being handed out by big studios to filmmakers, which means that you have to acknowledge that people are on their phones the whole time they're watching telly. So you have to simplify the plot so that they'll be able to follow along while they're browsing on their phone. So that's why you'll notice now in random, like in TV shows, even with good actors, they're saying really obvious things about what's happening. They're laying out the entire plot line and all of their emotions and motivations. Like the language has become really bait and on the nose. And that's because they're being told, the writers, that they have to write in a way that someone can carry on with doom scrolling or shopping online while following it in the background. So nothing can be too complex, nothing can be too high end. It has to be like we are purposefully dumbing down content, and that is leading to a less nuanced, less interesting, less thoughtful society.
Hi guys, Jester Bell is back. I'm not going to say female Frodo Baggins because my hair is growing out. I'm not sure how much I am of female Frodo Baggins now. But anyway, when I cover just the degradation of movies in the movie industry and how bad movies have gotten, sometimes I have heard the argument that, sure, movies are pretty bad right now, but everything is going to TV and streaming, and that's a big part of it, and you will find a lot of amazing shows on streaming. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't good shows to be found on streaming and good movies. However, I have to tell you, I have long held the opinion that the quality of streaming shows and TV is just as bad as the actual movies we get released in theaters. In fact, I would say part of the reason why, the millions of reasons why movies are so bad, is they try to emulate streaming to eventually become streaming movies. Streaming is, in fact, a terrible platform. It's been a terrible model for getting out quality shows, and there is actually proof of why that is. There is actually proof of why, thanks to streaming, people behind the scenes are less incentivized than ever to make good content and make content that audiences actually want to see. There is proof that the quality of TV is far worse than it used to be, and reasons and commands behind the scenes of how they run things of why that happened. Now, going into this, I just want to bring up that recently my brother has actually been doing a lot of marathoning of the original Star Trek: The Next Generation. I grew up with that show because it's what my dad watched. And as I'm seeing some of these old episodes of that show, I was just taken aback because this was not prestige television or anything like that. This was just regular old TV. But it's amazing how smart and thoughtful so many of the episodes was. Like, my favorite was always Time Zero, where they go back in time and there's always a discussion about, the relationship that they have with time. And Data sees that he is going to potentially die in the past. And, they have conversations about how he feels about that and how he's actually relieved that he's not immortal. And, they go back and meet Mark Twain and all of his opinions about the, negative opinions on mankind, and how he gets those opinions changed throughout the show, and, seeing the future and what the future could actually be. Now, there were episodes in The Next Generation, one that I used to watch growing up, where Data gets lost in with no memory of who he is in a very primitive planet who has no experience with technology and is very, very unadvanced. And they ask the question there, like, how do these people react when some unknown creature, an android, comes to their town? Or some people are afraid. Some people become friends with him. He's able to help the town in some ways. Like, there were so many episodes of The Next Generation, episodes with the Borg about arguing collectivism versus individualism, so many episodes of The Next Generation that actually had thought behind it, that seemed like it was written by people who had lived experience, and they used this show to explore different ideas. They wanted to have discussions about these different ideas. And once again, The Next Generation was not prestige television or anything, and I'm not saying every episode was good. There were some bad ones, but it's just amazing that a regular old TV show back then would have that kind of quality. And I realized you just don't see that anymore, because like earlier this year, I tried to watch Alien Earth, and it's like a show that thinks it's intelligent, that thinks it's having deep conversations, but it's not. You can tell the difference between writers who actually had something to say and some intelligent conversation to have, between writers who want to be smart, but they're not. They just want to sound smart. Alien Earth, I only got through an episode and like 10 minutes. I thought it was just so bad and so boring, and it took us forever to get anywhere, and it was so high on itself and thinking it was so much smarter than it was. But anyway, let's go a little further. Why is that? Why is TV so much worse now than it used to be? And of course, once again, there's exceptions. And one of the arguments in favor of streaming is, well, that's where a lot of prestige filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro has done Frankenstein. It doesn't play in my local theater. I'm going to watch it on Netflix, and I'm really looking forward to it. Like, they're saying that that's where all the prestige filmmakers are going. Like, Martin Scorsese did a film on Netflix. That's merely because in a day and age when studio executives do not know how to make something sell, they don't know how to do it. For a while, they were only relying on franchise films, which they now destroyed. They were only giving these prestige directors deals with Netflix. That was how they could get any film they wanted made. Yeah, some prestige filmmakers have been able to use Netflix, and they're just greenlighting all this content model to get their films made. That's all very well and good, but that does not mean, just because that there is occasionally a really good film or a really good TV show, that does not mean that overall the model of streaming has actually damaged all incentive for quality TV, like we used to get with a lot of episodes with The Next Generation. So let's get into the actual reasons now. How did the model of streaming change so that now filmmakers and writers were no longer incentivized to do quality content, in fact, steered away from it? Well, the first way that it did that is it shifted the original model. Originally, TV shows used to be dependent on ratings, how many people were watching them, because they were dependent on ads. So you would get, like, say, a 22-minute episode in a 30-minute time slot, or a 45-minute episode in an hour time slot, and that little empty space was used to play ads. The more people watched your show, the more people viewed the ads. And so that is how TV shows originally would make their money. So back then, the goal was just get as many eyes as you can watching this TV show. And so because of that, that incentivized you need to make quality TV shows. You need to make something that is going to get people to watch for that time slot. Always show up for that time slot so we can play these ads and make our money back. That's how it used to work, and that's how you used to get a lot of quality TV. However, that changed when the model became streaming, and no longer was it about you watching an individual show that would play ads. It was about you paying just for the subscription. What that gave is it gave these studios behind these shows, it gave them a constant stream of revenue, something that they had never had. They could always guarantee that they would get that revenue as long as they could keep people subscribed to their streaming service. And that was the new goal. Not trying to sell ads for individual shows, but just making sure people stayed subscribed. Now, one of the things that this did is it guaranteed these streaming services making just constant amounts of content, just so many pieces of content for you to consume. Think about Disney Plus and what they did with their Disney Plus shows for Marvel. They didn't try to make up an individual TV show that everybody loved and that everyone would continue to watch on the platform. No. Every kind of TV show that Marvel made, whether it was Loki, WandaVision, She-Hulk, Miss Marvel, just so many TV shows. Few of them, I think only one, got a second season. Every time one show would end, another one would start, whether it was Marvel or Star Wars. The idea here was that subscribers would always have a new TV show, that if they wanted to watch every single episode, then they would have to stay subscribed. Now, all of that TV was bad. That early era of Disney Plus, Marvel, and Star Wars was just terrible, but the goal was not to get an individual show to be successful with people. The goal was just keep people subscribed to the service, and if they have more content to watch coming out week to week and always a new show to watch almost every month, then they have to say subscribe to the streaming service. And that is how we got a lot of just content spewed out on these streaming services to try to keep people subscribed, because their goal is just to keep people subscribed to the service. And that has created a lot of problems. For one thing, there is so much content on these streaming services that oftentimes a lot of it just gets buried. People are overwhelmed by what to watch and just how much of it there is. Like, you sit on streaming service for hours and you can't find something to watch because you're overwhelmed with choice. We've heard that from a lot of people, that oftentimes these streaming services just sit and they say remain subscribed, but oftentimes they're too overwhelmed to even know what to watch on these streaming services. But it's also created another problem. Now that the revenue that these companies got was now based on subscriptions rather than ads for individual shows, it took away the incentive to make those individual shows good. Now it's just about keeping people on the streaming services through any way possible. And what that created is now studios and people behind the scenes could make whatever they wanted for these streaming services, especially since they were just making so much content. So it took away the incentive to make something the audience likes. Let's say the audience is maybe just subscribed for the back catalog, as polls say most people are for Disney Plus. That's why most people are subscribed to Disney Plus. Well, you can make a lot of your other crap and not really care about what the audience thinks, because it's all about the subscriptions that are already paid for. You can throw out whatever you want. And that's why there's so many shows on streaming services. Think about Star Trek. Do you think anyone is watching modern Star Trek on these streaming channels? But there's so much money already from these subscriptions that these shows can just sit and continue running, as the money is already coming in from the subscriptions for different reasons. And that actually created a new culture from the audience to the companies behind the scenes, where it stopped being about pleasing the audience. It stopped being about making quality TV. They can just shove whatever they want on these streaming services as content, and all they have to worry about is the subscriptions. They don't have to worry about people necessarily watching the individual shows. And I also think the amount of content is also just why so much stuff just gets greenlit by these studios, especially Netflix, that just had so much money. But there's another reason, a big reason, and you saw it at the beginning of the video, of why the quality of streaming shows has gone down so much. And it's actually an order from on high, because these shows on these platforms is looked at as something called second screen content. Now remember, the goal of these streaming services is not to get people to watch an individual show. It's just to make sure that they have subscriptions that people remain subscribed to the service, and that they remain on the service through any means possible. So what that has created is an order from above, from the executives of these companies to people making these shows, to actually dumb them down. Why is that? They want these shows to be playing in the background when people are on their phones, when people are shopping, when people are doing their chores, so it can just be in the background where people are distracted by something else. Their mindset is that people don't actually sit down to watch these shows. They essentially use them for background ambiance. And that has created an edict from on high about dumbing down the shows. That is why you get so many shows. And I saw this in Alien Earth, where a character will stop and say something super obvious explaining the plot, sometimes multiple times. Why? Because in their minds, people at home aren't actually watching these shows. They just have it on in the background. So they have to treat it like radio and actually explain their actions out loud, even though it's obvious, so in hopes that the person would hear it. Justine Bateman, a former Hollywood actress turned independent director, has also talked about this and talked about how she has had friends that have gotten this order to dumb their scripts down so that it can remain second screen content, something that is not actually trying to engage with its audience, something that just plays in the background where they do other things, so that they will remain on that streaming service for as long as possible. Now, I would like to talk about this because I think that it is a major misconception from the companies and studios behind this on the value of TV. Now, when I watch TV, the only time that I am going to pull out my phone and check other things is if the TV show is not engaging for me, if it is not interesting enough that I am not watching it. I don't turn on a TV show with the idea that I'm just gonna go on my phone the entire time if that show is interesting. And that the same thing goes for movies. If I am so engaged and invested in the movie because it's interesting, I don't want to go on my phone. I don't want to do other things. I want to pay attention to the interesting movie, and that is a great experience. I don't want to do anything else. So if you wanted more people to engage with your show, you might actually have to make a good show. And I think that that is the value of TV and movies that they have over YouTube content and whatnot, that they just don't realize that a lot of content on YouTube, unfortunately, it is disposable, and it's not as good as movies and TV, and it's not as substantial as you're getting a story that, let's say, in the case of Next Generation, explores all these themes and that really engages with you and really affects you and shapes you. But now they just look at TV and movies as content, more content to be played in the background. But the thing is, it's not good. It's not engaging. It's not even engaging in the same way that YouTube content is. And so what happens is a lot of people just ignore it. Like, it was recorded that YouTube itself is the biggest streaming service, and nothing that Hollywood does compares to it because they aren't giving any sort of product. I don't like to refer to TV and movies like that, but product that can compete with that. They're not making anything good. And I would say that that's also happened with movies because as Hollywood sees less and less value in movies themselves, they just looked at how much money Netflix was making at a certain point and decided they wanted that for themselves. I feel like movies themselves have become second screen content, dumbed down with the idea that they will eventually just be another piece on the endless catalog online, as each studio moved to create their own streaming service to get that good old Netflix money, which they thought was going to be the future and bring them even more profit than theatrical ever did, which actually wound up with all of them tearing each other down and taking away the value from each of them. Streaming was not the huge oasis of money and endless money that they thought it was going to be. Hollywood, and many people are saying this, is starting to become more and more obsolete as people look for their entertainment elsewhere because Hollywood just isn't making anything engaging. It's not making anything that can compete. And the problem with that is Hollywood neither understands or cares about their own products. They didn't understand that TV and movies are not a disposable piece of streaming content, and that eventually, if quality is bad enough, you will lose people, because why would people choose to listen to ambiance of shows they don't even care about on streaming when they could just watch something that they actually feel engaged with elsewhere? I'll also say it for myself that there are some times with a show that I might have already watched that I will play in the background. But those are shows that were made in the old days, shows that I have an emotional attachment with and that I actually derive something from. For example, I listen to sometimes Disney movies in the background when I am drawing. But that's because, once again, even with those shows that are not made to be played in the background, they're still giving me something. With hearing the music and the story play out, even though it's not made to be heard in the background, there's still a comfort in hearing it. But there's no comfort I get from something like, say, Alien Earth that hasn't given me any reason to care about the characters or story or feel anything from it at all, because it never even tried in the first place. So there you have it. It's not that streaming, quality-wise, is any better than things from movie theaters, because Hollywood itself has devalued their own products, essentially, and they've lost people over it, and they still can't figure out what the problem is. Which is why it seems that Hollywood might very well be on the way out, where other things like YouTube take over, or maybe independent creators. Through all of this, I just want someone to finally ask the question, hey, maybe we should care about quality again. Maybe we should understand what we actually have here as stories and storytelling rather than just pieces of content. I saw an article from Variety the other day clutching their pearls about the CEO of Paramount ushering us into this new era of alpha male masculinity and what the new political views of the new regime in Hollywood might be. And I'm like, rather than arguing about who controls the political narrative, have you guys ever asked the question of, can we make good movies? Can we make good TV shows again? Because that is the actual thing that is going to get people to engage with you again and engage with this format again. But that is all I got for you guys today. Thank you for watching this video. What did you think about all of this? And how do you think it could ever get better, if at all? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to support me, consider becoming a member or a patron. And I will see you guys next time.